Welcome back, thrill seekers, and I'd like to say a special hi-de-ho to a new viewer of this channel, my dad. Apparently, my dad is watching these. He gave it a like on my last video. He gave a like on, Instagram. So, hi Dad, how you doing? Call me sometime, because I'm worried about your situation. Anyway, I was asked to do a corporate gig, which I'm going to do on Wednesday. So on Wednesday morning, I am going to speak to a company called Service Now, which reminds me of that old Seinfeld gag, Serenity Now. Remember that one? Anyway, it's a kind of, I always like that one. Anyway, if you don't know it, it doesn't matter. And, oh, I don't know what Ziggy's upset about. Oh, I know what he's upset about. Oh, okay. He sees my girlfriend's mom, and now he wants a treat. Anyhow, so they asked me to answer 4 questions as part of a sort of a talk I'm going to give to them. The talk is based on these 4 questions, and question number 1 got me stumped. Not stumped, but it's such a big question, I started wondering how I can answer it in a brief time, because I've only got, like, 10 minutes to answer each question, probably. And the question is, what are the core principles of Zen Buddhism? So I wrote a bunch of notes here, and then I wrote a bunch of notes there, and what I thought I'd do with this video is a kind of dry run. So I'm going to look at the clock that ticks off the time. Well, you can't see it, but when I'm looking at this, I can see a time thingy that tells me how long I've gone on, and I'm going to do this. I didn't write this out as a speech, but I wrote some notes so that I know what things I want to say, and I'm going to see if this version of what are the core principles of Zen Buddhism can be done in under 10 minutes. So, wish me luck. Here we go. What are the core principles of Zen Buddhism? One of the problems with answering that question is that Zen Buddhism is not a belief system. And when you normally ask about a religion, or this is my kind of way of thinking about religions, at least when I first started looking into the matter of religion, it seems to me like there are 4 things that you want to know about a religion. What is their concept of God? What is their concept of the soul? What happens after you die? Everybody wants to know that one. And what's their holy book? What book do they go by? Those are the 4 questions. I would maybe add a 5th about morality, but since most religions have around the same sort of morality with just a few little kind of interesting additions or subtractions, we can kind of leave that one aside and just go with those 4 questions. Now, when you're talking about Zen Buddhism, or Buddhism in general, but Zen Buddhism specifically, those questions don't really apply. And there's a quote I've used in one of my books, and it is from D.T. Suzuki. D.T. Suzuki is probably, well, these days he's kind of been eclipsed by Thich Nhat Hanh and maybe a couple other people, I don't know. But for a long time, D.T. Suzuki was the authority on Zen Buddhism. You know, all of his books were considered the ones that people studied in universities and so on as the main text. Not so much religious Zen Buddhists, but academic Zen was studied through the lens of D.T. Suzuki. And this is from a book he called An Introduction to Zen Buddhism. It was published in 1934, and it is still in print today, so it's that influential, almost 100 years later. And he says in that book, Zen has no God to worship, no ceremonial rites to observe, no future abode to which the dead are destined. I have some questions about that statement, but basically it's true. The problem with that statement is it might make you think that Zen Buddhism is a kind of atheism, and Zen Buddhism is not a kind of atheism. It doesn't reject the idea of God so much as say that we don't have anything to say about God. Okay, I am looking at a genuine unidentified flying object in the air right now. I don't know what the hell this is. It is a white dot that is moving very, very slowly. It does not look like an airplane or a helicopter. What the hell is that? I don't think it's a helicopter because I don't hear anything. Could be a drone, maybe. There it is. There's the UFO. Definitely aliens.
So maybe the shape is like a mushroom shape?
Oh yeah, kind of, yeah. It's not perfectly round. Where is it now? I genuinely don't know what that was, and I'll put the video in the video that I shot in this video. Weird white dot floating slowly across the sky. So, aliens? Probably. So anyway, okay, what did I say about God? So it's not so much that Buddhism or Zen Buddhism rejects the idea of God like atheism does and says there is no God. It's more a sense of you can't describe God, so why even bother? And we just don't go there. That's kind of the Buddha's way of dealing with the question of God. So no God. There's no soul. They don't believe in an immortal soul that lives in your body that either goes to heaven or hell after you die or gets reincarnated or whatever. There's no soul. The third one, what happens after you die, is too big of a question to answer. Maybe we'll get to that later, but I'm just going to leave that aside. And the fourth one that's interesting about Zen Buddhism is the holy book. There is no holy book. There are a lot of scriptures associated with Buddhism in general and Zen Buddhism in particular, and I've heard that there were more scriptures or more writings about Buddhism than any other religion, but there is no agreed upon holy book for any sect of Buddhism as far as I know. And it was particularly in Zen Buddhism, there is definitely no idea of a holy book which is authoritative and final. So, to understand Zen Buddhism, it's good to know the life of Buddha. And I was kind of taking it for granted that everybody knew the life of Buddha, mainly because I've been involved in Buddhism for so long, so much of my life, and also I lived 11 years in Japan, where of course everybody knows the basic outline of the life of Buddha. And I realized after giving lectures and things over here that, not a lot of people know the basic outline of the life of Buddha. So here it is, the shortest version I can make it. Buddha was born about 2,500 years ago in northern India. He was the son of a kind of a king there, a member of royalty, and when he was born, it was prophesied that he would either become a great ruler or a great religious leader. And his father, the king, wanted him to become a great king and not to become a religious leader, so he sheltered the boy from seeing anything of the outside world. He had this great life in a palace where everything was provided for him that he could possibly want. There's a lot of details in the old scriptures about what he could get and all this stuff, but he just had this cushy life. And at one point, sometime probably in his early 20s or somewhere around there, he made a deal with his with a chariot driver. I think it was probably his father's chariot driver, since he wasn't allowed out of the house, to take him outside, and he saw four things that shifted his whole worldview. He saw a sick person, an old person, a dead person, and a monk. So he never knew about sickness, old age, and dying. That's how the story goes. Let's just leave it at the way they tell it. And then when he saw the monk, he realized there's a person who, and monk I'm using to mean a kind of wandering mendicant. There wasn't such a thing as a monastic practice in India at the time, but there were people who would wander the streets and beg for a living and work on spiritual matters. And that's what he saw, and he wanted to be one of those. So he left the castle and tried a whole bunch of different spiritual practices, many of which involved mortification of the body. They'd starve themselves or do all kinds of things to try to kind of weaken the body so that the soul could be free. That was a kind of a theory a lot of people in India held at the time. He tried all of those, and they didn't work for him, although he became a kind of a master at two of these practices, but he rejected them. And finally, he decided that what he was going to do was eat and drink in moderation, and he was going to sit in this kind of meditation posture with his legs crossed. He sat under a tree, and he just allowed life to present itself, and that was the practice that brought him to his great awakening, which made him the Buddha, which means the enlightened one. So that's the shortest version of the Buddha's life story that you'll ever hear. And from that time on, he went on to teach this style of meditation to others. And Dhyana was the word for meditation, which was kind of corrupted or changed into Chan in Chinese, and then the Japanese got a hold of the word and they pronounced it Zen. So that's where Zen Buddhism comes in. Zen Buddhism is a form of Buddhism that focuses on meditation as its main practice. Not all forms of Buddhism do this. And the Zen stream of Buddhism is part of what's called the Mahayana, which means the great vehicle. And this is a form of Buddhism that emerged in India maybe several hundred years after Buddha's death, and they took as their core principle what is called the Bodhisattva Vow. And to make sure I get this right, I'm going to read it off here. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it, is how the version I learned. So it's 4 impossible vows, but the main one that I think we want to talk about here is the first Bodhisattva vow is I vow to save all beings, which is the earliest Buddhists had it in mind that they were trying to save themselves. They were trying to do a meditation practice which would allow them to reach nirvana, which was kind of a personal salvation, after which they would never be reborn. So one of the things the Buddhists believed is that we are born again and again and again in different forms of life, probably more often as a human than not, but actually human birth is considered to be rare, so maybe not so often as a human. Anyway, there's a lot of birth going on, and that what you wanted to do is not be born again. So when people hear about reincarnation in the West, one of the things they often do is get excited about it, like, hey, I get to be reborn. But the early Buddhists believed that the idea was to not be reborn, was to kind of just end all existence, but not exactly, and that's what we'll get to in a minute. And the Mahayana Buddhists believed that no, our duty is to save everybody else before we ourselves enter nirvana. And since beings are numberless, that meant we're going to save all beings basically forever. So that's part of the Bodhisattva vow. The Buddha had 2 formulas that are very famous and good to know. One is the 4 Noble Truths, which is usually given as all life is suffering. The cause of suffering is desire. The way to end suffering is to end desire. And the way to end desire is to follow the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is, let me get this right, right view, right belief, right speech, right intention, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. Okay, so those are the 8 folds of the path. And this is basically an ethical path. And when it comes to ethics, the Zen Buddhists have a formula called the 10 Precepts, which are their ethical ideas. They're somewhat similar to the 10 Commandments, but not exactly. I'll just read them out to you right now. Here we go. Do not kill. Do not steal. Do not misuse sexuality is how it's usually given, so I'll just give you the standard version. We can talk about my teacher's version later if you want to. Don't lie. Don't become intoxicated. Don't drink or do drugs. Don't speak of past mistakes, which is an interesting one, but too long to get into. Don't praise self or blame others. Don't be covetous. Don't give way to anger, and don't disparage the 3 treasures, which are the Buddha, which is the Buddha, as well as the sort of conceptual Buddha, the Dharma, which is the teachings of Buddha, and the Sangha, which is the group of Buddhists. And one of the sort of ideas which is very interesting in Zen Buddhism is the idea of non-dualism, which means there is one thing in this whole universe, just one, and you are it. And Huang Po, who is one of the very important Chinese Buddhist masters, put it this way: all the Buddhas and all beings are nothing but the one mind, besides which nothing exists. This mind, which is without beginning, is unborn and indestructible. It is not green nor yellow, has neither form nor appearance. It does not belong to the categories of things which exist or do not exist, nor can it be thought of in terms of old or new. It is neither long nor short, big nor small, for it transcends all limits, measures, names, traces, and comparisons. It is that which you see before you. Begin to reason about it, and at once you fall into error. And that's kind of one of the weird mystical ideas that Zen Buddhists believe. And like I said, it's not a belief system. You can believe whatever you want and still be a Zen Buddhist. Hang on, somebody's at the gate. It was a meter reader, and Ziggy was a little upset about that. But I don't know if this is taking too long or not. But anyway, let's say I gave you the Huang Po quote. Also, I said it's not a belief system. If you want to believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, or that there is no God but God and Allah is his prophet, or whatever you want to believe, that's okay from the Zen Buddhist side. We don't care. The other side might care, but that's another facet of Buddhism, which I probably should put in the beginning of this lecture. Maybe I'll remember to do that. Also, the final thing I want to give you is Zazen. Zazen is the main practice of the Zen Buddhists. It is a specific form of meditation where you sit very still, you keep your eyes open, you're facing a wall in the tradition that I learned, and there's another tradition where you're facing away from the wall, but don't worry about that. And you try to just concentrate your whole energy on the action of only sitting. So it doesn't matter if there's thoughts in your mind. You're not trying to get rid of your thoughts, but you're trying to kind of ignore your thoughts. You're not trying to make a special state of mind or enlightenment or anything like that happen. You're just trying to be with the very ordinariness of your ordinary life and see it exactly as it really is. So there you go. Core principles of Zen Buddhism. I don't know how that went, but maybe I'll look at the comments, and that's a FedEx guy beeping. Anyway, maybe I'll look at the comments and see if I could improve this before Wednesday, but that's what I figure I'm going to say to the people at Service Now. How'd I do? Did I explain the core principles of Zen Buddhism? I hope I didn't make too much of a mess of it, but those are them, and I'm getting paid for that, so that's a good segue for this. That's one of the few things in the past year that I've actually getting paid for. But most of my pay comes from you folks sending donations to the URL you're seeing on the screen below. That is my main way of living, pretty much my only way of living, unless I get a couple more of these corporate gigs, which come like once every 5 years or something. But that's my main source of income, so I appreciate your sending me money. If you're having financial troubles or something, don't send me money. Please don't. I can handle it by myself, but I can handle it by myself because a lot of you are sending money, and I do appreciate that. Even those little $1 and $5 donations add up and help, and I like that a lot. Have a good time all the time. We will see you next time. Bye. Hey Ziggy, did you see the UFO? Ziggy, did you see the UFO? Do you think it was aliens? Do you think it was aliens? I think it might have been